Deputies responded and within 5 minutes had the suspect in custody. He did not cause any problems. He gave the weapon up. He did have the weapon on him at the time. It was a semi-automatic handgun. He'd fired multiple shots. We have updated information on the number of deceased. It is 3. We have 3 students, a 16-year-old male, a 14-year-old female, and a 17-year-old female. We also have 8 others that were shot in various stages at 3 different hospitals, McLaren Lapeer, McLaren Pontiac, and St. Joe's in Pontiac. The 2 people are currently in surgery, do not have their condition. The other 6 are all in stable condition with various gunshot wounds. The suspect, like I said, 15 years old, student of Oxford High School, lives in the village of Oxford.
My heart goes out to the families. This is an unimaginable tragedy. I hope that we can all rise to the occasion and wrap our arms around the families, the affected children and school personnel, and this community. It is an unimaginable tragedy, and I just wanted to be here because I think this is an important moment for us to support one another, to support this community. And I want to thank our first responders again. I think this is every parent's worst nightmare.
Wall Street took a beating for the second time in 3 sessions as health crisis jitters and interest rate worries spooked investors. Tuesday's sell-off put the finishing touches on what was a down month for the Dow and the S&P 500. Looking at Tuesday's closing action, the Dow slumped 652 points, the S&P 500 lost 88, the Nasdaq fell 245. Wall Street followed the weak tone set in Europe after the head of drug maker Moderna told the Financial Times that existing COVID-19 vaccines would be less effective against the Omicron variant. But the selling really picked up after Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell told the Senate Banking Committee it was time for the Federal Reserve to pull back some of its support for the economy.
We now look at an economy that's very strong and inflationary pressures that are high, and that means it's appropriate, I think, for us to discuss at our next meeting, which is in a couple weeks, whether it will be appropriate to wrap up our purchases a few months earlier.
The Fed had been buying $120 billion in bonds each month to help prop up the economy. Powell also said it was time to retire the word transitory when referring to the current inflation surge. Greg Hahn, Chief Investment Officer at Winthrop Capital Management, said Powell's testimony was a needed change in tone, even if it caught the markets off guard.
The Fed has to remove its bond purchase program before they can move interest rates higher. That's our view of how they'll start to unwind the stimulative monetary policy. So getting the bond purchase program out of the way quicker is going to set a path for the Fed to start to move interest rates higher, potentially by June of next year.
The thought of a less accommodative Fed, just as investors face the uncertainty of a new COVID-19 variant, was too much for Wall Street to take at the same time. Oil prices dropped sharply. Crude oil fell 4.5% to less than $67 a barrel, to lows not seen since August.
Josephine Baker, de son et la ségrégation raciale. Dès son plus jeune âge, elle alterne les petits travaux de ménage et d'école pour aider une fratrie de Paris. Le 2 octobre 1925, au théâtre des Champs-Élysées à Paris.
The Omicron coronavirus variant detected in southern Africa could be the most likely candidate to displace the highly contagious Delta variant. That's according to Adrian Purin, the acting executive director of South Africa's National Institute of Communicable Diseases, or NICD. He spoke to Reuters on Tuesday.
We thought, well, what will outcompete Delta? I think that's always been the question. What will outcompete Delta, in terms of transmissibility, at least?
The discovery of Omicron has caused global alarm, with countries limiting travel from southern Africa for fear it could spread quickly, even in vaccinated populations, and the World Health Organization saying it carries a high risk of infection. If Omicron proves to be more transmissible than the Delta variant, it could lead to a sharp spike in infections that could put pressure on hospitals. Purin said scientists should know within 4 weeks to what extent Omicron can evade the immunity generated by vaccines or prior infection, and whether it leads to worse clinical symptoms than other variants. Anecdotal accounts by doctors who have treated South African COVID-19 patients say Omicron appears to be producing mild symptoms, including a dry cough, fever, and night sweats, but experts have cautioned against drawing firm conclusions. Purin said it was too early to say whether Omicron was displacing Delta in South Africa. Anne von Gottberg, a clinical microbiologist at the NICD, said it looked like infections were rising throughout the country, but cautioned against linking that with Omicron just yet.
In fact, and some of those admissions might have started before we think the emergence of Omicron, and we also seen that there was an increase in influenza cases in South Africa just in the last month or so. And so we need to really be careful to look at the other respiratory infections and other respiratory diseases.
We are deeply disappointed.
Leaders in South Africa have criticized swift travel restrictions by the United States and other nations as unfair and crippling to their tourism and other sectors. South Africa has reported close to 3 million COVID-19 infections during the pandemic and over 89,000 deaths, the most on the African continent.
After pleading guilty earlier this year to helping the Sinaloa drug cartel, the wife of imprisoned Mexican drug kingpin Joaquin El Chapo Guzman was sentenced to 3 years in prison on Tuesday by a U.S. judge. Before being sentenced, 32-year-old Emma Coronel Aspuro pleaded with the U.S. district judge to show her mercy, saying in Spanish through an interpreter, quote, "With all due respect, I address you today to express my true regret for any and all harm that I may have done, and I ask that you and all the citizens of this country forgive me." In June, Coronel pleaded guilty to 3 counts of conspiring to distribute illegal drugs, conspiring to launder money, and of engaging in financial dealings with the Sinaloa drug cartel. Her defense attorney, Jeffrey Lichtman, spoke to the media after the sentencing, saying his client was swept into the world of drug trafficking while still a minor and deserved mercy.
Her role was simply to be the wife. That's what her role was, period. The guidelines reflect somebody who's involved in a very large conspiracy of which they're a very tiny person. And that's what the facts showed. That's what the judge saw. It's what the government saw. We've been saying this from the beginning.
Coronel, a U.S.-born former beauty queen, married Guzman while she was a teenager. She was arrested at Dulles International Airport outside Washington in February. As part of her plea agreement with prosecutors, Coronel admitted to acting as a courier between Guzman and other members of the Sinaloa cartel, while he was being held in Mexico's Altiplano prison following his 2014 arrest. Guzman used those communications to plan his 2015 escape from the prison through an underground tunnel built by the cartel leading to the shower in his cell. The drug lord was recaptured in January 2016 and extradited 1 year later to the United States. He was convicted in February 2019 of drug trafficking, conspiracy, kidnapping, murder, and other charges, and later sentenced to life in prison.